It is a little bit noisy outside, but I did want to chat about something before I went home, and that is a particular topic in skateboarding that I think beginners should be a little bit more aware of, and I really haven't heard anyone talk about, and that's the actual texture of the ground that you're skating. So, the ground that you're skating can make a huge difference on how your tricks feel and how easy or how hard they are to perform. I learned this myself over time as I ended up skating many different surfaces. I moved around quite a bit the last couple years, and I've been at this spot and that spot, here and there, all over the place. And what I learned is that the ground that you skate on is really important. Just how much friction there is underneath your wheels on the ground makes a huge difference in how tricks feel. And to try to simplify it as much as possible, it's basically the more friction, the more strength and more effort, and sometimes more skill it takes to perform a trick, in my experience. Whereas the less friction, it might be easier to move a trick and to get tricks to rotate, particularly, I'll get to them, but particularly rotating ones, scooping ones, and those type that scrape on the ground. Those are particularly easier, but of course it's a little bit easier to slip out. And this is going to be a different combination for everyone. It's going to depend on the ground in your wheels. Harder wheels tend to slide a little bit more, softer wheels tend to grip a little bit more, and then it's the same for ground. Smoother ground tends to slide a little bit better, and a rougher ground tends to have more friction, tends to slide a little bit less. So I pulled together some examples. I actually have this great little setup here with a pavilion with smooth ground right next to a much rougher basketball court, and all the tricks that involve sliding on the ground, footwork, rail whips, any type of slides, mirage twists. They all slide very well, and I find myself rolling easier. Rolling easier because there's less friction, one push will get me a lot farther than being somewhere that's really rough. So I can push less, I can use less strength to rotate all of my tricks. I think the pressure flip is a really good example of this because it involves scraping the nose along the ground. So when you're on a very flat surface, there's less friction, and it takes a lot less strength to really shove the side of the board down and under and flip it over. So pressure flips are a lot easier to do on smooth surfaces in my experience. I also think that it is easier to learn certain tricks like shove-its because there's less friction. Even if the wheels get stuck on the ground and kind of slide around, you're still more likely to get a full 180-degree shove-it rotation if you're on smoother ground. So if you're struggling with your shove-its and you do have access to smoother ground, it might be easier to do them there if you have hard wheels. So the less friction, the easier it is to shove it, in my opinion, which is why today I actually was trying out some 540 big spins. I'm not close, I'm just kind of feeling them out. I've never tried them before, and I was curious how close I could get, how afraid I will be of them. And so I'm getting the shove it, but I'm definitely too afraid to commit to a body varial as well. So, but it was exciting, and it's definitely easier. I got the 540 to shove it actually a couple times while trying this, but yeah, my body is definitely afraid of this trick so far. I think that something like the tail stop nose hook impossible is also going to be easier on something like this floor because there's just less friction. I'm fighting against less friction to get the tail to slide off the ground and rotate. So it definitely has an effect. If you go to somewhere grippier, a lot of tricks are going to be, I don't want to say harder, they're just different. They might take more strength. I think that pop shove-its take more strength to shove off the ground to get that nice little scoop off of the ground when you're on a surface that is rough like this. Um, But on the other side, you might feel a little bit safer trying tricks on ground that's rougher and that you're rolling slower on. So it could be that tricks are easier to commit to when you're on rougher ground. And I have heard that from other friends as well. I have one friend in particular who really liked this local skate park when he was younger because he didn't roll as quickly. So he felt safer practicing and trying his tricks because there was a more solid landing because his wheels were gripping the ground more. They didn't slide and move around as much. So there can be benefits to having rougher ground too, if that's something that you might benefit from. For example, truck stands, especially particularly no-handed truck stands, I find to be way easier on rougher ground. So sometimes I'm not even brave enough to try a no-handed truck stand. Somewhere with smooth ground like that pavilion, I'm only willing to do them on rough ground because I just do not want to slip out the way I know that I can on slick, smooth ground. It's windy, there's dogs barking, people are mowing their lawn, and I don't have any notes or a script or anything, so I'm kind of losing track, getting a little distracted here. I think the core of what I'm trying to say, the core of my argument, is that more friction will often mean more strength and perhaps even more skill to get your tricks done because there's just more to fight against. There's more friction to fight against. However, because it slides around less and you might be rolling slower, you might be a little more confident in learning tricks and trying new things. But smoother ground with harder wheels is going to equal less friction and make some things a lot easier, like getting the shove it to rotate. It will take less strength and it might even take a little bit less skill because you don't have to try as hard to get the board to rotate or flip or pressure as you would on rough ground. And I bring this up because I know some beginners, particularly when they're learning shove-its and they're struggling to get the board to rotate, I'll look at where they're skating and they're just on incredibly rough ground. And I know for a fact that with their, like the way that they're doing the shove-it, if they were doing that on smoother ground, they would land it. However, they might not feel as comfortable to do it on that smooth ground. So that's basically the point that I'm trying to get at, is that when you're learning tricks, when you're working on things, take into consideration where you're skating and what that surface looks like, what type of wheels you have. And if you can obviously choose different surfaces while working on different tricks. And maybe once you get really, really good at doing shove-its on smooth ground, you can more easily take them to rough ground. And then the same goes for a lot of tricks or vice versa. Once you get really confident landing your tricks on rougher ground, you can probably take them to smoother ground and have less issues with confidence. That's really all I wanted to talk about today. I've been enjoying skating these couple spots here, even though the house right next door has a couple dogs that like to chit-chat while I'm here. But regardless, I hope you're having a great day.